Super Smash Bros. Melee, Call of Duty 4, Rayman 2, Mega Man 2, all games that came earlier on in a series that will come to serve to be the catalyst for that series to reach the promised land. From collecting dust in a game store backroom to bestseller, and having small cult followings to becoming cultural phenomenons. However, regarding the topic of a certain game being the catalyst for a series, a list like that would not have any sort of validation, or quite frankly, credibility, if the name Assassin's Creed 2 was not among them. Assassin's Creed, as we've already covered, is one of the gaming industry's crown jewels, and is a true testament to the series' consistency, range, and overall longevity. It was once reaching the heights that many game developing studios can only dream of their games even coming close to reaching. It was once on the brink of certain death, with no real direction and struggling to once again catch that lightning in a bottle and recapture the magic of old. And it has also seen somewhat of a second resurgence in recent years, with the upcoming Assassin's Creed Valhalla being one of the main talking points in the gaming scene. It seems as though the series has finally found its feet again, and has reclaimed its place as one of the gaming industry's main pillars. But what if I told you that none of that would have happened if it wasn't for the roaring success of a certain game? One that will seemingly forever serve to be the benchmark for all of the series' future titles. A game that never fails to serve up longtime fans a healthy dose of fun and nostalgia, while simultaneously showing new fans just what the series is capable of and where the bar should be for all the other entrants. You may have heard me say that the series has recently found its feet again. Well, this is where it found them the first time. I'm of course talking about the timeless, groundbreaking, lively, exquisitely sculpted masterclass known as Assassin's Creed 2. Now, you may be wondering why I've already given this game more praise in the first few minutes than I gave Assassin's Creed 1 in the entirety of my previous episode, which by the way you should totally check out. Well, allow me to explain what everyone fortunate enough to have experienced it already knows. Starting with the story. Directly following the events of Assassin's Creed 1, test subject Desmond Miles is rescued from his confinement inside the Abstergo Industries facility in which he was imprisoned for the entirety of the first game by Lucy Stillman, the assistant of Dr. Warren Vidic, who was the modern-day antagonist in the previous game, and who we would then learn is a mole planted in Abstergo's ranks by the modern-day assassins. Alongside Lucy, whom is extremely reluctant to offer Desmond any sort of information and or explanation as to what exactly is going on, Desmond battles his way out of the facility and into the parking lot where the getaway vehicle waits. When the coast is clear, Lucy convinces Desmond to get into the trunk of the vehicle so he can be taken to a secret safe house in an undisclosed location. It is here where we meet the rest of Lucy's team of assassins. Sean Hastings, a brilliant historian and historical analyst with just a little bit of an attitude problem.
What's all this stuff for?
This stuff, Desmond. Oh, this stuff is nothing special, really, this stuff. It's just the stuff that keeps our entire operation from falling apart, really. It requires a great deal of concentration to keep it all moving, so you'll forgive me if I don't have time to play meet and greet.
Sean's in charge of maintaining our knowledge archives. It's like a digital library. He'll be riding shotgun with me.
Yeah, it's not just databases, though. I also provide tactical support for the other assassins. You know, Desmond, the ones who are out there, actually doing stuff, risking their lives, little things like that.
And Rebecca Crane, a bubbly technician and computer expert whom, using plans stolen from Abstergo by Lucy, has built her own version of the Animus, simply dubbed the Animus 2. Or Baby, as Rebecca likes to refer to it.
I take care of Baby. It's It's my job to keep her up and running.
Baby? You mean the Animus?
This version of the Animus has a few key differences from its predecessor, however. The minor differences include the team being able to communicate with Desmond whilst he is in the Animus, and an entire database displaying in-depth information about things like factions, groups, landmarks, historical figures, and character bios, all unlocked as the player encounters them in-game and is available for the player to view at any time via the pause menu. The main difference with Baby, however, is that it can allow its user to learn all of their ancestors' skills and abilities almost instantly through what is called the bleeding effect. That one little addition will serve as a pivotal turning point in the making the modern day sections of this and many of the future games in the series much more impactful and meaningful. And it would also serve to give Desmond much more depth, as throughout the game we'll see his progress as he eventually comes into his own as a true member of the Assassins. It gives the players a reason to care and take an interest in Desmond, and gives them a sense of eagerness to see what happens next in the modern day sections each time the previous one ends, which, that in itself, is a cosmic leap ahead of what we saw in Assassin's Creed 1, where he, or any of the other characters for that matter, weren't really given much room to shine. But little did we know that those seismic improvements were only just the beginning. As after the introductory period of being introduced to the crew, Desmond learns that he is tasked with investigating the memories of another one of his assassin ancestors, by the name of Ezio Auditore da Firenze, a name that is very familiar with both casual and long-term fans alike. Hey, what's going on? Quick disclaimer, I'm an uncultured Englishman. You'll have to excuse my pronunciation of a lot of the names I'm about to mention. This is where the magic truly begins. Desmond logs into the Animus and we are then transported to Florence, Italy, in the year 1459 during the Italian Renaissance, where we witness the birth of our would-be hero into a wealthy Florentine family with his father, banker Giovanni Auditore da Firenze, a fictional depiction of real-life banker and merchant Giovanni Tornabuoni, and his mother, Maria. We then fast forward a few years to 1476, where a brash and charismatic 17-year-old Ezio is valiantly leading a mob of fellow carefree teenagers in the streets of Florence, awaiting the arrival of Vieri of the De Pazzi family, enemies of the Auditore family. Vieri arrives, a war of words ensues.
Your family that cries for guards when there's trouble, Cotardo. Afraid to handle things yourself?
Your sister seemed quite satisfied with the handling I gave her earlier.
Quickly followed by a brawl between the two parties, which ends in Vieri accepting defeat and scurrying off to fight another day. In the midst of the celebration, Ezio's older brother Federico notices Ezio suffered a broken nose in the scuffle and suggests that he visits one of the city's doctors, to which Ezio replies that he doesn't have any money, to which Federico jokingly implies that he spent it all on women and wine. And knowing Ezio, it's probably obvious what the answer is.
Your lip.
Just a scratch.
Let the doctor decide.
It's not necessary. Besides, I've no money for this doctor of yours.
Wasted it on women and wine, huh?
I'd hardly call it wasted. Lend me some florins then. Or have you done the same?
After looting some of the knocked out bodies from the fight and travelling to the nearest doctor, Ezio is patched up and receives some medicine. All after Federico jokingly begs the doctor to fix Ezio up as he is, quote unquote, nothing without his good looks. To which Ezio politely tells his brother to...
Fuck it.
Federico then challenges Ezio to a race to the top of one of the city's tallest buildings, and the player gets their first real free running segment. Once at the top, the two share a magical moment where they talk about the great lives that they live and hope that it may never change or that it may never change them. Complete with a breathtaking view of the city, excellent background music, and the Assassin's Creed 2 logo boldly positioned in the middle of the screen to close it out.
It is a good life we lead, brother.
The best. May it never change.
And may it never change us.
Now that is how you grab a player's attention. The reason I delved into this intro so much is because it really shows just how far the series had come in terms of its storytelling, tone, and atmosphere in such a short amount of time. This introduction scene alone shows so much more depth, personality, and life than the entirety of what was shown in Assassin's Creed 1, and instantly demands the player's full attention in the narrative and, even more, their full investment in these characters. By this point, you had only known these characters for all of about 5 minutes, but you already feel attached to them and intrigued by them, which is way more than what can be said for Altair and the gang in the previous game. Ezio's brash demeanour, carefree attitude, and youthful vigour is just the right amount to where he is intriguing and entertaining without coming across as annoying, whereas Altair pretty much had the personality of a robot. So the player is already exposed to the gargantuan sized improvements so early on, and it doesn't really need any more persuading to stick around for what's to come. Then begins the first real chapter of the game, which basically serves to lay the foundations and gives the players a chance to get to know and familiarize themselves with not only Ezio and his family, but the beautiful and blooming city of Florence, with Ezio being tasked with things like running errands for his father and collecting feathers for his little brother Pedrico, and scenes such as Ezio beating up his sister's boyfriend for cheating on her and breaking her heart, and Ezio sneaking into his love's window at night, strongly against her father's wishes, and is seen jumping out of the same window and getting chased by guards throughout the city the following morning as a result. My boy. We also have our very first encounter with a well-known historical figure during this introductory period, which will be the first of many as the series progresses. Whilst helping his mother on an errand which involved picking up some paintings from a certain artist's workshop, that artist is none other than Leonardo da Vinci himself, who will be a main fixture both throughout this game and the following game, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. The game would quickly take a dark turn, however. As Ezio was out running an errand for his father, he returns to his family's home to find that his father and 2 brothers have been arrested and taken to the highest room in the city's prison. After scaling the prison walls and sneaking past the guards, Ezio gets to their window and learns that the entire Auditore family is being framed for treason against the city, and asks Ezio to speak with Uberto Alberetti, a powerful magistrate and close friend of the Auditore family, and assured Ezio that he would smooth things out. Big mistake. He is also instructed to unlock a secret room in his father's study and take everything in the chest that sits inside in precaution in case things go bad, where he finds his father's old assassin robes, a broken hidden blade, and a page of codex left behind by one Altair ibn Lahad. Spoiler alert, things go bad. After them reporting to Alberti's door, Ezio was again assured that things would be okay. During the last part of their brief conversation, however, Ezio notices a large and ominous figure lurking in the background of the house, whom was wearing Templar clothing. Shortly afterwards, Ezio travels to the city centre where his father and brothers are set to be hanged, with Alberti himself publicly orchestrating it. Ezio attempts to stop the murders, but is too late in doing so, and witnesses his family members die before his own eyes.
You and your accomplices stand accused of the crime of treason. Have you any evidence to counter this charge?
Yes, the documents that were delivered to you last night.
I'm afraid I know nothing of these documents.
He's lying!
I need to get closer.
In the absence of any compelling evidence to the contrary, I am bound to pronounce you guilty. You and your collaborators are hereby sentenced to death.
You are the traitor, Roberto, and one of them. You may take our lives this day, but we will have yours in return, I swear! We will!
Father! There! Grab the boy! He's one of them!
I'll kill you for what you've done!
Yeah, told you it gets dark. After the public executions, the Auditore family are public enemy number one, and Ezio's remaining family members get a temporary hiding spot in the courtesan's HQ, where he encounters Sister Teodora, leader of the courtesans, who trains Ezio to be able to pickpocket, decrease his notoriety, and blend in with the city's large crowds, all in an effort to get close enough to Alberti to exact revenge on him before fleeing the city with his mother and sister, which is exactly what he did. After assassinating Alberti and fighting his way out of the city with his remaining family members, our would-be hero embarks on a journey to his Uncle Mario's villa in the countryside. After yet another failed attempt to stop him by Vieri di Pazzi, we are then introduced to Mario Auditore and his mercenaries, who just couldn't resist to get a Super Mario reference in there.
It's me, Mario!
After being introduced and accustomed to Mario's villa, which self-admittedly had seen better days, Ezio informs his uncle that he does not intend to stay for very long, and that he intends for him and his family to flee the country entirely.
Return here when you're finished, and we'll begin.
Begin? Begin what?
I thought you'd come here to train.
No, Uncle. I came here to escape Firenze, and I intend to take my family further still.
But what about your father? He'd want you to finish his work.
What work? My father was a banker.
Wait, he did not tell you?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Ma che me combini, Giovanni? Where to even begin? Go and fetch the gear in the market. It will give me time to think. But that's that. We'll talk more later.
Mario, shocked at the lack of wider knowledge that his brother Giovanni had bestowed upon Ezio, tells him that Alberti was only a small cog in a much bigger and wider conspiracy against his father, and that the ominous figure in Alberti's house was none other than Rodrigo Borgia, one of the most powerful men in Europe and Grand Master of the Templar Order. Also a fictional depiction of Rodrigo de Borgia, who was Pope from 1492 until his death in 1503. Don't say you never learn anything from these videos. He also informs Ezio that his father was part of a secret brotherhood known as the Assassins, and that his true life's work was gathering all of the codex pages left behind by Altair and deciphering them, as together they form a map which shows the location of a first civilization vault. After much convincing from his uncle Mario, Ezio decides that he will continue his father's work and track down and assassinate every remaining conspirator responsible for the death of his father and brothers. This takes him on an epic and enthralling journey throughout Italy, from smaller, more community-driven towns like Forli, the architectural masterpiece known as Venice, and eventually Rome, to seek and destroy each and every cog in the well-oiled machine that fueled his father's demise. Along the way, Ezio made no shortage of allies, from philosopher by the name of Niccolo Machiavelli, a fictional depiction of diplomat, philosopher, and writer during the Italian Renaissance period by the same name, Caterina Sforza, feisty and somewhat seductive leader of the humble city of Forli, Antonio de Margini, leader of the rebels and thieves in Venice, and perhaps most importantly, Ezio made an ally and a friend in Leonardo da Vinci, whom assists Ezio by deciphering the codex pages that Ezio collects during his travels, and even provides him with upgrades to his gear and armor based on what he finds. In the later stages of the game, Ezio learns of a plan by the Templars to transport the Apple of Eden. It makes its return to Rome. Ezio then disguises himself as a guard and manages to steal the apple from the enemy completely undetected. Or so he thought, as nearing the end of the mission, he is confronted by Rodrigo Borgia himself. He made his intentions very clear, as he valiantly exclaims that he needs both the staff and the Apple of Eden to unlock the first civilization vault, as he believes that the power and knowledge that lies inside is greater than anything the world had ever witnessed. Just as Ezio's plan seemed all but doomed to fail, everyone that he met along his grueling journey, his uncle Mario, sister Teodora, Antonio, the whole gang, and they help Ezio in killing all of the attacking Templar soldiers, with Borgia being able to escape, however. It is here where we learn that Mario, along with all of the other characters present, are all revealed to be assassins, and that Ezio is to be formally inducted into the Brotherhood. I feel like this moment is up there among the most important in not just this game, but the entire series, as it feels like a true culmination of everything that Ezio had been through and that he had worked towards throughout his grueling journey, and it really does highlight just how far he has come, both in terms of his skills, but also as a person. It's clear that he's no longer that arrogant and careless boy treating the streets of Florence like his own personal sandbox like we saw in the beginning, and that he is now truly ready to accept his responsibilities as an assassin and do what he needs to be done to serve a purpose much greater than him or any other one person. We then go back to modern day, where we learn that many sections of Ezio's memories are too corrupted for the team to access. Those sections would later be used as DLC. So the team then sends Desmond into Ezio's final memory sequence that they want him to investigate. We then fast forward to the year 1499, where Rodrigo Borgia reigns as Pope. During the first scene where we see Ezio, he seems to have somewhat of a realization. He explains that before, the only reason he was collecting the various codex pages was simply to honor his father, and didn't think of them as any more than an old man's fantasy. But he then realizes that they are of much more significance than that, and if the player hasn't already done this, Ezio vows to find every one of the various codex pages, get the Staff of Eden from Rodrigo Borgia, and open the vault before the Templars can. When all of the pages are collected, deciphered, and combined, the map reveals that the vault is located right underneath the Vatican, and that's why Rodrigo Borgia elected to be Pope. So with the Apple of Eden on his person, Ezio infiltrates the Vatican City and confronts Borgia and defeats him. But rather than kill his mortal enemy, however, he spares him so that he may live with the fact that he failed. To be completely honest, anyone with half a brain could tell that will come back to bite him on the behind at some point, but that's neither here nor there. Ezio proceeds to combine the staff and the apple to open the entrance to the vault. Once inside the vault, Ezio encounters a woman named Minerva, whom we learn is one of the first civilizations of superior beings known as the Isu. Minerva, aware that Desmond can hear her, explains how her people originally created humans to serve as slaves, but then evolved to the point that they could both live in harmony. But the majority of their civilization was wiped out by a catastrophe known as an extremely powerful solar flare, and that the various vaults were constructed by the survivors to preserve their knowledge and technology, mainly the various pieces of Eden. Before she vanishes, she speaks to Desmond and says that he can fulfill a prophecy, leaving Ezio's story on a temporary cliffhanger as, shortly after, Desmond is pulled from the Animus as Abstergo agents storm the team's safe house, forcing them to pack up and go on the run to a new location. But more importantly, however, Ezio is informed that the assassins have discovered that a solar flare, the likes of which wiped out the Isu, is set to pass by Earth in just a few months' time, and if it does, it could wipe out humanity entirely, thus concluding the gut-wrenchingly emotional and tear-jerkingly beautiful thrill ride known as Assassin's Creed 2. Right, well, I think I could use a lay down after all that, but for the sake of entertainment, I'm not going to. You should be thankful. Before I get into talking about the gameplay, I want to further delve into this story and Ezio himself, as I feel that the way Ubisoft set and layered both of these components is truly what makes this game one of the greats. Let's start with the scenery. The various different cities and areas each offer something worth remembering, and each generate an amazing atmosphere. You have the big and blooming cities that produce a sense of liveliness, and is truly uplifting, especially when compared to the drab, somber, and downright ugliness of Assassin's Creed 1, which didn't really generate much of anything besides boredom. Then you have the beautiful and exquisite scenery of the countryside, which may not have that much worth in terms of features like stores and collectibles, but if anything, is at least extremely serene and peaceful. Almost all of these areas truly feel like they belong, and they add something to the overall experience. Now let's talk about Ezio himself. Throughout all of the craziness and the left turns that this game puts you through, Ezio never feels like an afterthought or that he's just there for the sake of being there. As a character, he demands your attention as we witness him going through various stages of his young adult life. We see him start as a careless playboy, then vengeful young man, to a more mature and collected adult. We essentially witness him grow up, and it's amazing to see and think about after you've beaten the main story. But he's not all anger, brawn, and women, however. Throughout the game, Ezio does show a softer and more emotional side, which instantly makes him more interesting and sympathetic. He shows fear and uncertainty after the death of his father and brothers. He shows kindness and friendship towards Leonardo. And there's even a bonus scene that players can interact with in Florence sometime after Ezio first flees the city, where he shows sorrow as it flashes back to Alberti's assassination, where he says a final goodbye to his love as he informs her that he must leave the city and that he's uncertain if he will ever return. These scenes not only generate emotion and sympathy towards these characters, but it also gives a player a good incentive to explore and interact with the rest of the map outside of what the main quest line forces them to, something that was practically non-existent in the first game. So overall, it's pretty safe to say that the story of Assassin's Creed 2 was a roaring success. It struck a powerful chord with so many people and made a lot of future long-time fans of the series. It's everything you could really want out of an Assassin's Creed game. Amazing characters, engaging narrative, a stunning setting to cap it all off, and everything in between. So in the few areas where Assassin's Creed 1's story did deliver, this game did that and then some, setting up the series for so many sequels, as well as etching out a place for it in the upper echelons of gaming's totem pole. And where the first game's story failed, this game rectified those mistakes entirely by really going all in on making the characters and the narrative something worth remembering and praising. So finally, let's move on to the other side of the coin, the gameplay. Players were delighted when it became apparent that the colossal changes and improvements didn't only apply to the storytelling, as Assassin's Creed 2 came jam-packed with new features, collectibles, and really just fun things to do other than the main quests. You can participate in free running races all throughout the map and run errands for various people for extra currency. You can donate money to refurbishing Mario's villa and get extra currency periodically for your service, and also have access to more and better supplies from the various stores throughout the villa. You can collect feathers for Ezio's mother as they remind her of her youngest child Pedrico, who was hanged along with her husband and eldest son. You can find a series of glyphs on the wall throughout the map, which first initiates a mini puzzle before unlocking an image that shows the Apple of Eden present during many historical events. Once the player has completed all of them, a hidden cutscene unlocked, which shows two human slaves during the era of the first Isu civilization, one male and one female, running away trying to steal an apple, which the team then theorized to be Adam and Eve, which all in all offers a very interesting set of lore regarding the Isu and another perspective regarding Adam and Eve. You could even do a series of side quests that involve working your way through various tombs throughout Italy to retrieve the assassin key that lies at the end in the resting place of a dead assassin. Collecting all of them will reward you with Altair's finest set of armor, which is locked away underneath the villa. This is an excellent addition to the game, as it again incentivizes playing the side quests, as they can be both fun and challenging, and they reward you with the most powerful and coolest looking set of armor in the game. The one collectible that I have an issue with, however, are the codex pages. The codex pages aren't much different from collecting the feathers, and they do offer some very good rewards. The problem that I have with them is that collecting all of them is mandatory in order to beat the game. You only get a handful of them throughout playing the main story, so you are forced to go out of your way to collect them. And if you don't have the benefit of hindsight, or if you don't like collecting things, it can make for a tedious and unwanted process, as they're not exactly the most entertaining thing to obtain. I think it would have been better if the only codex pages that were required to beat the game were the ones that you get through simply playing through the story, which would completely eliminate the tedious nature of them while still offering an incentive to collect them because of the rewards that they offer. On top of that, this game gives us a more structured and refined version of the gameplay formula from Assassin's Creed 1, with Eagle Vision, a way to identify key targets and enemies, being able to be used in third-person view as opposed to first-person view, making it much clearer and easier to use, with groups like the mercenaries, courtesans and thieves scattered throughout the city and available for temporary hire at any time. These serve as a great way to either kill, distract, or draw enemies away from a location, and overall was a great addition to the game. And most notably, our friend Leonardo is on hand to provide us with upgrades to our gear, which adds so much more to the gameplay experience. He provides us with things like poison blades, a miniature hand cannon for Ezio's gauntlet, and allows us to use 2 hidden blades at one time, making it possible to perform double assassinations if 2 enemies are close enough to each other, which enhances the stealth portions of the game. And lastly, the boring and repetitive mission structure of Assassin's Creed 1 is given some much needed additions and upgrades, with various missions throughout the game having a completely new and unique mechanic. There's one where you have to defend Leonardo's carriage from enemies whilst on the move to Venice. There's also a mission that starts off with Ezio using one of Leonardo's inventions, the first rendition of a hang glider, to infiltrate a fortress while simultaneously going above various bonfires set up by his allies to stay up in the air, whilst trying to avoid getting shot down by archers. While the stealth is still very much the main fixture of this game, these missions offer a much needed and much welcome change of pace, and it keeps things interesting, which again was extremely lacking in the previous title. However, not everything from the previous game got a nice makeover. Let's start with the combat. While there are a vast selection of different weapons available in the stores throughout Italy, players still opted to just spam the attack button with the hidden blade, as that was still very much the most effective course of action, which left the combat still feeling like an unrefined chore. And lastly, I want to talk about the free running. The free running in this game, much like in the first game, is perhaps not as smooth and consistent as it should be. It is easy to see the improvements, but it improved upon something that couldn't exactly get much worse, so the bar was already pretty low. It still feels very clunky, buggy, and still not dependent enough on skill and timing. I have lost count how many times my character either just randomly bounces off of a wall or just randomly does a 90-degree turn straight off of a building. And unfortunately, it's not a feature that got fixed anytime soon. But overall, Assassin's Creed 2 more than delivered on the gameplay front by rectifying the missteps of the first game and setting the bar for the future sequels. So overall, in the grand scheme of things, I'm willing to say that Assassin's Creed 2 is the single most important and influential entry in the entire Assassin's Creed franchise, and that is a hill I'm willing to die on. Without it, the gaming industry would never have truly seen the potential of one of the most exceptional series, and never would have had the rabid fanfare it does today. And I wouldn't even be making this video if it wasn't for the path that this game paved. But with all of that being said, I still think that it gets a little too much praise, and if you'll put down your torches and pitchforks for a second, then I'll explain why. I think this game is held in a little too high of a regard, as, yes, it was responsible for drawing in a massive amount of the fan base, and it was a lot of people's first AC game, and as we all know, nostalgia can be very powerful, but it can also oftentimes be blinding. While yes, the story is absolutely enthralling, with the benefit of hindsight, however, I think it's just slightly behind some of the other entries in the AC sphere. And while people may argue that Ezio is the series' greatest protagonist, while it certainly makes for a good debate, it also has a very easy counter-argument, that being that he is featured in 3 back-to-back-to-back titles, and is still the only character in the series to be the main protagonist in more than one game. So obviously he's going to seem like the best because he's received the most time and attention. It is often argued that if other protagonists in the series, like Edward Kenway from Assassin's Creed 4 or Bayek from Assassin's Creed Origins, got the same amount of showcase time and attention that Ezio received, that they would even surpass Ezio. And honestly, I for one agree with that argument. Don't get it twisted, Ezio is a phenomenal protagonist and is an excellent choice to be the face of the series. I just don't think he's the be-all end-all. And with certain key elements of the gameplay obviously still flawed, the cracks are under a microscope, and it does start to become clearer that maybe this game gets a little too much praise. I feel it focused a little too much on adding and introducing new mechanics, and not enough on reevaluating and fixing the existing ones. But still, when looking at the entire Assassin's Creed discography, while I may not think that this game is the best, I certainly think that it's one of the best, and it deserves to be treasured and praised. It is a game that has stood the test of time and defiantly laughed in its face. It is a pinpoint for when the wheels on the Assassin's Creed wagon really went into overdrive and then to the moon. And if nothing else, it's responsible for breathing life into my favourite video game franchise of all time, and putting it on the map and on the road to greatness, and then immortality. And that, just in itself, is certainly worth noting. My final rating for Assassin's Creed 2 is a 9.2 out of 10. A tier.